little bit weird to be calling this video TBR because I am such a mood reader that I really struggle with a TBR. I think there's something about the idea of like having put your books on a list and then just being like, okay, this is what I'm going to read. It feels too prescriptive, and I immediately just am like, no. Even if I'm like really desperate to read the books, I'm just like, it just sends my brain. So what I tend to do is almost like earmark books kind of seasonally, into just, sometimes they're not related to the season, but they're kind of vibes that I resonate with at that time, and I'm like, okay, these are kind of roughly, here's a like biggish selection of things that I want to pick from right now because it's the right vibes for how I'm feeling. And autumn is definitely my favourite season by quite a long way, and I just love the like coziness and the like, I feel like I love all the seasons and I'm always ready for a new one, but by the time autumn comes around, I think because it's like that back to school feeling, things are getting cozy, I love all the foods, I love all the smells, I love all the like kind of crunchy leaves, textures, fluffy jumpers, all of that. And I really love the books that come with this season. And I tend to I tend to divide my spooky season reading into different kind of categories. So you've got, I feel like things kind of start off, September is back to school, back to uni, dark academia vibes. So that is what I want to kick off your spooky season. And then I like to move into kind of gothic-y, creepy vibes in October, sort of like, you know, I'm getting into the spooky season. I might dabble in kind of like paranormal creatures, we're talking the vampires, the ghosts, all of that kind of stuff, but I mainly reserve those for then November. And by that point I'm kind of into it, and you know, I kind of pick and choose from whatever I've got left over. But yeah, so I thought I would kick things off by talking about a few dark academia books that are on my hit list this year. So first up, we've got Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is following Alex Stern, who has got into Yale through a kind of quirk of accident, and shouldn't really be there, doesn't really have the grades, but is there on the caveat that she will keep an eye on the secret societies and like not police them, but sort of just make sure that everything that they're doing is not too crazy. But obviously she gets wrapped up in some craziness, and there's a dead girl, there's magic, there's all sorts of spooky vibes, and it's set in Yale, which is obviously like a historic university in the US, and it's got lots of like old buildings, and I've made a start on this already and I'm really enjoying it. I feel like it's quite slow burn, like it took me quite a long time to read the first like 10%, but the vibes are immaculate. Like it's kind of, there's like an abandoned old operating theatre in the first like chunk. There's her moving into uni, there's like descriptions of all the old houses and what they used to be, and lots of like cathedrals and libraries and all of that good stuff. So really enjoying this so far, but pick one. Next up, got a booktube favourite, Nevermore. I'm not a huge middle grade reader. In my head I am, and I think I used to read a lot more than I do now, but I feel like I've really kind of grown out of it. I think sometimes it's just a bit too obvious for me, and it can be a bit slow paced, and it can be a little bit sort of obvious. Obviously I'm an adult and it's for children, so I mean, like, you know, I'm a firm believer that children's books are for everybody, but I think maybe I kind of overdid on the middle grade a few years ago, and now I'm still got a bit of fatigue. But everyone whose opinions I trust on the Bookstanet is obsessed with this, and my old boss designed the cover, and I used to work with a lot of people that worked on this book and were huge fans of this book. I've read it multiple times, loved it, loved the vibes. It's also really chonky for middle grade, so it kind of gives me hope. Apparently the world building is immaculate. It follows our main character Morrigan Crow, who is, I think she's some kind of cursed child, and she's doomed to die, but somebody swoops in and says, actually, like, we're going to save you, and but you have to go to this school and go through these trials, and I don't know whether she like becomes a witch or something, but she has to kind of have a talent. And I think the world building's supposed to be amazing, and it's got the school vibes, and it's got kind of spooky trials. So that sounds, this actually, I'm intrigued. I want to know how it goes. I'm not sure whether this is actually going to be for me, but I want to find out. And then next up, Books to Net Darling, we've got Babel. Now, I've always said this word Babel, but I know lots of people say it Babel. I think Babel is US and Babel is UK, but I don't really know. And I actually think that R.F. Kuang was like, I think that was a deliberate choice in choosing a word that is said differently. I don't know huge amounts about this book other than it is dark academia. I believe it's set in an alternative version of Oxford Uni. This is also really heavy, it's quite difficult to hold up. But I think it's set in an alternative Oxford Uni, and it focuses on language and translation and how history's written down, and the issues that can come in with that, and I think it's supposed to be an amazing commentary on kind of academia and history and the way we tell stories. And this all might be incorrect, but I have just heard, like, people who I trust have just said this is stunning, and it's made people cry who I know don't really cry, and it sounds incredible, and I want to kind of go in blind and just let it unfold for me. And it was really, really hyped last year, and I got it when it came out. I mean, this is the Fairy edition. It is stunning. Although I do actually prefer the black version, because for me it kind of gives you more dark academia vibes, and I think this grey is just sort of, there's something about it that's sort of, the image loses some of that like beautiful contrast, and I just think it has slightly less impact. But I mean, obviously that foil is exquisite. In fact, you know what, let's do the whole workbook. This is underneath on the Fairy Loot. So you can kind of see here, like, I mean, that is the Tower of Babel. But like the white on the black is just like beautiful. Yeah. And I mean, you've got the kind of dark academia vibe. This artwork is not, the style's not really my vibe, but I think these are, yeah. I thought they were foiled for a minute then, because they're quite glowy, but they're not. But you've got this, like, you know, dark academia vibes the second you open the book. So this was one of my most anticipated of last year. It was kind of a 5-star prediction, but I happened to be finishing my master's dissertation this time last year, so I didn't read anything. I like really ruined my own spooky season by having to finish my dissertation, which I did, yay. But I think that's why I'm so keen to go a bit harder this year. And this is one of my top 3 must get to reads, because I didn't get to it last year, so I'm really excited about that one. Have been for like a full calendar year. And then we move into what I would call sort of spooky vibes. So that's kind of like where the dark academia is giving me like gothic-y old house mansion vibes. I kind of like to run with that. So I'm just having a look here. I've got a few more. So first up, we've got Anatomy. So this is, oh, who's it by? Dana Schwartz. And this, like in Ninth House and the kind of creepy operating theatre vibes, this is about a woman in 1817 in Edinburgh, already beautiful gothic setting, love that. But it's about a woman called Hazel who wants to become a surgeon. She doesn't want to get married, and she's told, you know, if you can pass the exam, we'll let you be a surgeon, but you can't come to any of the lectures. So she's like, well, how am I going to learn how to do this? I'm going to need some bodies. And she makes friends with, I think he's a gravedigger, a resurrection man. I don't know what that means. I'm going to find out. But yeah, I think she befriends a guy who digs up bodies for a living, and they join forces, and he's noticed that there's some skullduggery afoot and things are being weird, and they uncover some secrets together, and it's creepy, and it's about dead bodies, and it's about Edinburgh, and it's about that kind of medical, educational, academic setting. So this sounds like it's gonna have vibes. Also, I absolutely love this cover. Like, I think it's so creepy. I really love that it's got this like unfinished cover. It hasn't got any finishes. It's just this like incredible image. And yeah, I love this typeface. I just think the whole thing is exquisite. And then in a similar kind of historical, creepy vein, we've got The Doll Factory. And this is about a woman who makes dolls, and she is sort of picked up on the street one day by an artist who says, you know, like, can I use you as my muse? You know, I would like to paint you. She says, okay, as long as you teach me how to paint. But then through this kind of new art world, she meets some other people who are creepy and become obsessed with her. And it sounds like it's kind of very like obsessive, coercive, kind of creepy, like that. You've got that kind of Victorian setting, all that goes on. I don't love this cover, but like you can see on the back there's like these like little like sort of vignettes of kind of sewing and things sewn together, and there's like kind of mice, and it's just a little bit like, it's beautiful but it's unnerving and unsettling and oppressive and claustrophobic, and yeah. And also this was recommended by Victoria, from what Victoria read, and I really trust her recommendations on like historical fiction and stuff. I think for me this is going to fit like a kind of Sarah Watersy vibe, which I really enjoy. I've read a few of her books and I love that kind of Victorian creeping mystery vibe. Hopefully this will have some kind of, well, I don't know, doesn't mention anything about any kind of queer love, but yeah, I think there is some romance in here. And then also on the creepy vibes, I've picked up The Book Eaters as one that I want to read. Again, this was really anticipated for me last year when it came out, and sorry, I'm sat on the floor, it's actually quite uncomfy. But this was one that I wanted to pick up last year and just didn't get around to due to the aforementioned dissertation. But this is one about, there are kind of, I think there are 6 families left of these book eaters, and they kind of, I think they feed off of like the knowledge within books, and then within them they can kind of have like essentially like a birth defect, and they can have kind of like a quirk of birth, which means that some of them don't feed off books, they feed off human minds instead, and they need those to survive. And this is the story of a woman who gives birth to one of these children who needs to feed off of minds, and kind of what she does to survive. I think this, when I said queer story about that one, this has definitely got some queer romance in it, and it's kind of like about like desperation and like what a mother will do to protect her child. And like, I find that really interesting. Like, I love reading stories about mothers and like behaving in ways that aren't expected of them. Like, I think, you know, society often portrays mothers in kind of one really distinct way, where they got to be kind of caring and nurturing and loving and soft and gentle and welcoming, and I love seeing a different side of motherhood, you know, where mothers are like vicious and will do anything to protect their children, and there can be that kind of violent streak and stuff that you do kind of see in nature. So I think this one is going to have like just going to be a really good time. I think that it's also like a really fun kind of cover. I really enjoy this. I wonder what's underneath. It's very rare that I actually take the jackets off my hardbacks. That's not very exciting. It's just black with the title on. I feel like I'm a bit spoiled with special editions, you know. Now I'm like, oh, it's just plain, it's just a hardback. Let's put them back together. The other one I was going to pick up in this kind of vibes category is the Inheritance Games, which I think it's literally just vibes for me, because when I read the back earlier, I was like, this actually it's not spooky season. It's not like, there's no haunting, there's no paranormal, there's no kind of there's no actual kind of Halloween vibes really, but I think for me the fact that she like has to move into a mansion and this guy's died, and it's, sorry, no synopsis from me here, it's about a girl who finds out that she's inherited all this money and this mansion from this billionaire who's died, but she has to go through a series of trials, I think where she's against his family, but she moves into the mansion and she has to do all these trials to kind of like earn the money, and yeah, and the family are kind of plotting against her, and I think for me it's just this like uneasy feeling with the kind of huge house setting that just gives me creepy autumnal vibes, which I'm excited about. I think it's kind of, yeah, I'm hoping for something that's like unnerving and sort of unsettling and like this manipulative, like dark side of humans where they kind of are plotting against just this vulnerable girl. Like I'm hoping for kind of creepy and horrible people basically, which is sort of, you know, to me that's like what I enjoy about dark academia. Like I want to see some like horrible plotting manipulative people in this kind of big old house, and like, or like big creepy, you know, like university, like I want old buildings, I want, you know, that kind of musty library smell evoked for me. Beyond dark academia, this time of year also like just makes me think of my own like academic experiences, and I did A-level English and I did English at uni, so I associate this time of year with getting like a long reading list that I had to kind of work my way through. And in the UK quite often, you know, the academic English literature books are classics, and quite often, you know, like Victorian classics. So I also really associate this time of year with reading like classic literature from, you know, the kind of Victorian period, particularly. I don't know what this is about how broad my education was, because probably not very. A lie, I actually went to a uni where we had a really like broad syllabus, which was great, and definitely like made me a more varied reader, side note. But I did have several years where I did have to read a lot of classics, and there's something about it being kind of colder, and again with like wanting to read the historical books like The Doll Factory, like Anatomy, like that just make me kind of want to immerse myself in another time, in another way of doing things. And I think, you know, quite often like the Victorians, it was a bit more rural, that like you get that kind of unnerving like sense of things that I kind of like. It's also sort of, they were more isolated, some of these stories, like people are more isolated, they have to spend more time in nature, which again really resonates with me in this season. So I thought I'd do a little interlude where I just put in some classics that I also want to get to at some point. First up is Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. I read Thomas Hardy for my A-level and really enjoyed it. I read, oh my gosh, what's it called? Return of the Native, which I think is actually more of an unusual choice. That's the only Thomas Hardy book I've read. I think Tess of the D'Urbervilles is obviously his most famous, and then I've had this copy of Jude the Obscure sitting on my shelf since I did A-level, so quite a long time ago, probably like 15 years ago. But yeah, I almost don't really know what this is about either. They're normally about kind of people getting trapped in relationships and being thwarted by themselves, and you know, about kind of, but you know what, let me just read the back. Jude Fawley is torn between the ideals of the intellect and the pleasures of the senses, both of which are denied him by the narrowness of contemporary attitudes. His ambition to study at the University of Christminster is thwarted first by his relationship with Arabella, who traps him into marrying her, and later by the refusal of the colleges to consider a self-taught workman like himself. Only Jude's cousin Sue has enough independence of thought to persuade him that the system is to blame and not himself. But even Sue finds it hard to overcome the prejudice which surrounds them. Despite her love for Jude and her free principles, she's reluctant to live with him as his mistress. Ooh, that's like weirdly